Allyship, consensual, critical, and active. Welcome to today's module where we explore what makes an ally. Some of the required materials for this module are 30 to 45 minutes, an open mind, audio capability with either headphones or a speaker, and it is suggested that you utilize the corresponding worksheet available at the link below. Additionally, we suggest that you could do this alone or with your team. Hi, my name is Zoe. I'm an Indigenous Health Research Facilitator with the BC NEAR. I'm Nakatma from the Spuzum First Nation and here to share some thoughts on allyship. I would like to take the time to acknowledge the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Please pause the video to take a moment for you to acknowledge the territory you are on and how you locate yourself on it. What are some of the key themes that emerge around allyship? Blogs, academic literature, and published online resources highlight some key themes that include critical self-reflection, consensual, active, decolonial, supporting instead of leading, change, radical, public spaces, intimate relationships, aspirational. You might think, why does allyship need an adjective or a verb? When buzzwords become widely used, their meaning often gets diluted. Has this become an identity signifier used in introductions, or do we enact this in our lives and work? In what ways do you exemplify this? I encourage you to think of this personally in an ongoing way. The critical self-reflection and action required in these processes are widely applicable. Space is created for greater understandings and are crucial for engaging communities, cultures, and life experiences that are different from our own. Indigenous communities have a long history of negative experiences with researchers, from harmful research practices to intellectual theft. This often leads to hesitation in partnering on research. The desire to partner with Indigenous communities tells the community in question nothing about your values, ethics, or willingness to learn or acknowledge mistakes. Building relationships demonstrates the way that a partnership would work and sets up expectations and accountability. Trust can be built, but it is not deserved. Feel free to pause the video to read the word cloud and think about how each of these themes might apply or which ones you had not thought of as related to allyship. In other words, it is impossible to become an ally. It is only possible to aspire to be an ally. As allyship requires one to constantly cast a critical eye on themselves, to reevaluate how they are choosing to live and carry themselves, and to think about how their lifestyle and choices, directly or indirectly, impact Indigenous peoples. Allyship is a journey that one embarks upon with the distant goal of being an ally never truly in reach. For one can be seen as an ally in the eyes of one person, but not another. Does this quote in relation to the themes prompt a reconsideration of how you currently think of allyship? Visit the corresponding worksheet now to fill in the first two fields, writing down the themes that speak to you most and which themes you think you need to work on. Where do we address allyship? In many research spaces, the work is often thought of as needing to be objective, but allyship doesn't work well with objectivity. Bringing the actions of allyship home from work are necessary to embody the themes of radical change and decolonization. So therefore, we address allyship in the workplace, at home, in community, within all of our relationships, and in public and private spaces. Effective ways to engage in allyship. Engaging in decolonial processes, supporting rather than leading, actively working to observe and change inequitable systems and our own biases. What can this look like? Building relationship, learning about oppression and privilege, history, nations, cultures, and land, listening, and acting. What do you not do? Appropriate culture, take leadership, seek emotional support, interfere, or have expectations. If allies don't act, then they aren't really allies. More than that, they are doing harm. Racism. Why do we have to talk about it? When thinking about allyship, we must also engage with the understanding and addressing the processes of racism. Racism is societal, structural, and systemic, where we are all participating through both conscious and unconscious ways. Understanding that we have all lived in the system means that we all have unlearning to do, something that takes effort, time, and action in every part of our lives. Allyship requires self-reflection of the biases we hold and how we are positioned in spaces directly or indirectly. Ironically, racism is easy to ignore because it is ubiquitous. Dr. Aldred likened it to trying to get a fish to see water. A racist worldview can be composed of habits and thoughts that are subtle, almost imperceptible. She reassured me that acknowledging racism does not make one a bad person. Quite the opposite. We can't heal what we can't name. Pause the video here to return to the worksheet and fill in the next two fields on racism. Answering, how do you see the racism in the world? And can you reflect on a time or situation that you would now choose to do something differently? For example, change what you said or did, speak up, leave, etc. Allyship in a research setting. There has been a long history of trauma caused by research and the medical field to Indigenous communities. This includes, but is not limited to, exploitation, which could be the use of information for personal gain without community benefit, a misinterpretation of practices based on the non-inclusion of the context, for example, misunderstanding the reasons behind certain practices that result in further marginalization in medical practices. This could include the work around diabetes, where the reservation system impacted and continues to impact food sovereignty, and does impact our health, but now there is medical discrimination used in the treatment of Indigenous patients with diabetes. Mistreatment. The inhumane treatment of patients and participant. Here, this could include the Indian hospitals and the experimentation done on Indigenous children and nutrition or tuberculosis in Indian hospitals. Non-consent. Inconsistent or wrong information given to community or participants. This could include the misuse of data for purposes not disclosed to community members. Extractive. No benefit and or harm to community or participants. This could be the use of Indigenous knowledge for use in pharmaceuticals. For example, the yew tree is now hard to find for its commercial use in cancer treatments. What can allyship look like in a research context? It could be building relationships prior to planning stages, ongoing work within organizations to change policies, procedures, and processes to better facilitate community needs, accepting no for an answer, listening and supporting instead of leading, continuous consent and reflection, and OCAP, or ownership, control, access, and possession principles. Please pause the video here to complete the self-reflection section of the worksheet, answering these questions. What are some of the areas that you feel demonstrate your aspiration to allyship? What are some of the areas that you feel could be improved personally or within your organization? Learning example, 10 cups of tea. The 10 cups of tea is a process where a researcher engages in relationship building prior to research. While this is not a culturally traditional practice, it draws on cultural understandings. There is an opportunity for a relationship to be built and trust to be developed. One where a participant feels comfortable and fully understands the project and has the ability to say no. In the 10 cups of tea process, a researcher will have 10 cups of tea with a participant prior to engaging in research. Please pause the video here and return to the worksheet to reflect on how is this process similar or different from your own research process. Reflection questions, 10 cups of tea. Please pause the video here to return to the worksheet to answer the following questions. When ready, continue to the next slide. Does the 10 cups of tea process always work? Can you do the work you want to? What are the principles that this process engages? How would you do this within your organization? What are some of the barriers that would need to be addressed? Learning example, Lakota Language Consortium. Where a few years ago, the US-based organization, the Lakota Language Consortium, secured government funding and approached the Standing Rock Sioux tribe to record the Lakota language and stories from their elders. There was an understanding that these recordings would be available for their members. However, they have now come to the realization that the materials would only be available for a fee, in the forms of dictionaries and textbooks. This is problematic in many ways. Of important note would be the difference in viewing and handling research data and ethical practices. As a result, the Lakota Language Consortium has been banned from entering the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Please pause the video to return to the worksheet, identifying some of the issues that you can see in this scenario. Observational starting points, the Lakota Language Consortium. Indigenous people view knowledge as collective and requires a deep sense of responsibility. Stories hold our knowledges, legal traditions, and protocols, and are only shared with responsibility. Publication of these stories without permission is harmful to our ways of knowing and being. Addressing the ownership and control of data is crucial to consensual, critical, and active allyship, where the OCAP principles can be a starting point. I encourage you to think about how this might relate to the research that you are doing and how there might be a different understanding of the ownership of the research data for peoples who have collective-based responsibilities that have to be balanced carefully as individuals. Please return to the worksheet now for the last reflection. Thank you. A BC Near module.